First of all, thank you for inviting me over here, all the way from Germany. I'm going to talk about one particular project, which is called Apocalypsis, and it's quite a fitting theme. For many people, many booksellers in particular, think that e-publishing is the end of the world, or at least the work of the devil. This is not quite true, you know. It is just the end of the world as we know it. Apocalypsis was a project that started out in 2010. The first installment took about 1.5 years to finish. The second and third about 1 year each. The third one hasn't yet been published. So what actually is a multimedia reading experience supposed to be? Well, we started out with something we were competent at. Bastei Lübbe is the German publisher of Dan Brown. So we thought we should start out with a Vatican thriller. And this was, as I said, written. Actually, I wrote the first 5-page treatment in 2010. And if all my prophecies would have come as close, I should be happy and much richer, presumably. So it's about a German pope retiring. The name of the pope at that time was Pope John Paul III, and the year was 2011. In the course of the story, it developed from much more than a Vatican thriller into a conspiracy about everything, explaining, among else, the death of Ötzi, the fall of Echnaton, and the true reason behind the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, no offense meant, among else, including the absolute true nature of evil. As for the format, we tried to cover as many product forms as we possibly could, and decided early on not to follow the structure of a novel, but rather of a television series. I will get back to the various forms at the end when I talk about how to actually make money from this. So, Bastei Entertainment started out in 2010 just as the ebook division of Bastei Lübbe. By now we have published some 1,800 ebooks to date, with about 600 new books coming each year. So this was just a service. Later on, we went on to doing enhanced or augmented ebooks, adding elements such as video interviews. In this insert, for instance, Ken Follett, or documentary material. The last Ken Follett we published, Fall of Giants, Winter of the World, contained about 1 hour of documentary material about the Nazis and the Third World War, taken from the ZDF archives, the television company archives, or animation, for instance, in children's books. But then we decided that we should have specifically developed content, making use of all the new technical possibilities. So we started out to think, if we take an iPad, which was a revolutionary new device at that time, what can we actually do with an iPad? So we actually conceived this project not with a book in the back of our minds, but with a tablet. So what is Apocalypsis? If you have downloaded the app in the iStore and started, it will start with a trailer. I'm cutting out the animation and the sound just for the brevity, because my time is limited. So what the trailer shows is a sequence of images, of symbols, which will become later relevant in the story. And then it opens up to the story. And our core competence as a provider of content is still storytelling, and the story remains the same, whether in portrait or in landscape mode. The formatting is not important, but as you will may see, there are buttons at the bottom, and there the innovation starts. So, as this feature is actually taking more or less from a DVD, we have a season overview. That is, you can access the individual episodes. There are 12 of them, or in this case 13. There's episode 0, which is given away for free. And within the episodes, you have a chapter overview. So you can jump to any subchapter in the story. You may purchase the episodes individually, but you may also buy a season pass. So this is a system taking over from DVD sets from television series. You also have an inventory, which is a feature taken from gaming, from role-playing games, computer games. Inventory giving additional information, factual information, encyclopedic data, or for instance a blueprint, a plan of a building, or something like that, which is triggered at certain points in the story. Then the symbol at the bottom is blinking, and you will retrieve the information for the whole rest of your reading. And of course, we use the possibilities we have with color, with sound, also for mood changes, for changes in time or space. For instance, at the right, this is the first chapter where the villain is getting into the focus, and then the background switches, of course, to blood red. We have illustrations. One of the advantages, if you have a real life setting, you can work with photographs. This is part of a sweep of the Vatican grounds. You also have objects you can manipulate with your fingers, resizing them, or just sweeping them away. You can stop any sound just by tapping forward to the next page. You can sweep away any image you don't like or don't use or don't want to be bothered with at the moment. So you can just read the story as itself. But if you don't enter into the game, you're missing something. Just to give you one example, at a certain point in the story, our hero finds a murdered woman in a hotel suite, and she clutches a couple of scraps of paper in her hand. The hero never learns what's actually written on that paper, but the reader may by arranging the pieces of the puzzle on the screen, and then he reads an email off print which tells him that two other characters in the story have a relationship. This is an information the hero doesn't know, but the reader does. And the hero gets the information 3 chapters later. So either you enter into the game, then you have an advantage in knowledge, or you don't. You just read the coming chapters at a different level of awareness. So all these elements are not just gimmicks, they change the story, but you are free either to use them or not. And there are, in the first season, there are three instances where video is actually replacing text. One of them is a vision that was filmed with a subjective head camera. The next one is an animation sequence. You've seen one of the images at the very beginning of a migraine attack our hero has. Actually, he's possessed by a demon, but he doesn't know so at that time. And the third one was a live action video we filmed with 2 professional actors. It was filmed in a derelict factory hall near to our offices, and there were 2 colleagues of mine as stand-ins. This was a waterboarding scene, so the poor actor actually had to suffer quite a lot during the night. I say we keep on showing this video to our writers, and we never had any problems with delayed manuscript since. These sequences replace text that is in the text version, which is sold parallel. They are told as narrative, more or less divergent. Of course, the symbolic sequence is totally different in the text. And how to make money out of this harebrained scheme. This is something which we're required to do as participants in this panel. Well, we try to spread the risk as broadly as we possibly could. So next to the app, which in itself is commercially a disaster, I must admit. This was, as I said, a 6-figure investment, and most of the money went into the app. We have a read version, simply the EPUB, an illustrated text with static illustrations. We have a listen version, which is an MP3 audio download, and later also published on CD. And we have a read and listen version, which was a development of our own. Unfortunately, it works only in the iOS world, where you can switch between text and audio at each sentence. So if you're in the tram and stop reading and you want to listen from that point on, you can just plug in your earphones and continue listening. There was also a printed mass market paperback subsequently, which sold some 60,000 copies, which is quite good for Germany. So it's not a runaway bestseller, but it's more than just mid-list. But that wasn't our first intention. And as you see, the pricing, we made some frightful mistakes with pricing to start with. It was priced much too high because we calculated it as a novel. We thought, well, what's the price of a hardback? And we've got 600 pages of text and all these multimedia elements and all that, so we can probably command 20 euros, but the customers weren't ready to pay for that much. So the pricing is crucial, and we priced this according to the various formats, and basically the pricing is somewhere in between 1 and 2 euros, which is accidental purchase, that you don't think that much about spending 99 cents for something you just want to try. And I'm coming to the end. Just final sentence on international distribution. We are publishing this under our own imprint in English. We have cooperative partners in Spanish and Mandarin Chinese. And for other languages, we are just selling licenses. So just trying to publish this as broadly as we can finally reimburse our investment. And I think it's about breaking even now. And it's a very long-tail scheme. So I have hopes for this in the future as well.
Thank you. Next, you have to answer hard questions. Any audience questions for Helmut?
Oh,
come on! I said we were going to win this afternoon's question fest.
Final slide. This is the Chinese evening.
Okay. Okay. You guys have a couple more speakers, but we want to get 2 questions from the audience in this round. Okay. So my question's for you, and we talked about this a bit, but I'd like you to talk because the publishers. How are you getting your authors involved in this sort of thing, especially since you're approaching it so differently?
Yeah, well, we hold all the rights to the story. That we employ our authors in the way they get a share from the net proceeds, but we need authors who are actually capable of also not just of writing, but of working in a team. So if we do this multimedia, we have sessions which last about 4 hours each, and we think we make about 3 chapters from the story, just seeing what actually can we do, in what medium, what effects can we use, and the author has to be cooperative. He has even to be willing to rewrite his text if necessary. So this is a completely different relationship. It's more like making a television series than writing a novel.
Okay. And you also touched on another question I have. How do you find the team, the right people to create this sort of product? I mean, a lot of publishers that I know don't have this kind of in-house talent.
Well, first of all, we have a department of our own, which is just doing digital publishing. And we are working with a small company called Coldwise Solutions, who are also by now situated in Cologne. And they do all the technical programming and the art direction as well.
And one last question. Oh, wait, Andrew, good job.
Yeah. So, a quick question. You mentioned that the app was a commercial disaster.
Definitely.
Can you say a bit more about how the different channels worked for you commercially?
And Andrew's asked how the various channels have worked for him and commercially, especially since he mentioned that it was a bit of a financial disaster.
Yeah, well, what worked best was the audio, in fact, because the audio audience is used to buying small pieces of a narrative, of a story. Apart from that, I think we made the most revenue actually from the printed book in the end. So it's good to have a book production to fall back on in this case. But on the other hand, this was of course a project of prestige as well. We did this just, first of all, to show that we could do it and to use it as a learning experience, hoping not to lose as much money. And as I said, it seems to be working out by now. But that wasn't, obviously, it wasn't sure from the very beginning.
Great, thank you.
It was very kind of Marco to invite me, and I think he deserves commendation for also placing me right after Helmut. I hope you'll find that my relationship to what was just presented will provide you with a really generative juxtaposition, because so much of what was built here by Helmut is so impressive and overwhelming, and what we're doing really is the opposite of that. Incredibly lightweight, very lean, a marketing budget really close to zero. And so I hope that if that seemed like something you weren't capable of doing or interested in doing, that what we're doing might excite you on the flip side. I'm here to talk about the Rogue Reader, which in its essence is a publishing showcase for suspense fiction from what we consider to be the next generation of genre superstars. We build engrossing digital books with multimedia elements that are carefully edited and artfully designed for readers to engage with across multiple platforms. If that sounds like something that a publisher would say, it should, except, of course, that we are not a publisher, we're a literary agent. Our 4 virtues that undergirded the Rogue Reader was that we wanted to be audaciously curated. We wanted to be author first, we wanted to be digital only, and we wanted to be agency managed. I want to talk about the last of those first as a way of giving some context to this little very modest experiment that we're doing in New York. Literary agents have historically, and I understand that literary agents look very different in your context than they do in mine, but I tend to think that the literary agent is going to be so fully and wholly reinvented in the next few years that any difference between your agents and our agents will evaporate anyway. Literary agents have traditionally hovered over a very small sliver of the publishing value chain. In fact, if you looked at an agent's relationship to content, it would be really difficult to draw a straight line to either content or to eventual container. Agents don't create much, and they certainly don't produce anything. In many ways, they were sort of like a stent. They kept the blood flowing, but they weren't quite organic. They weren't muscle, and they weren't blood, and they weren't bone. And yet, as we've witnessed the disintermediation of the past few years, where every single player in the publishing value chain that stands between a reader and a writer, everybody in the middle whose position has been threatened and has been forced into a period of defense and reinvention, it seems to me that a surprising thing has developed, and that is that the agent actually has a more vital role than ever due to their position sort of outside the traditional linearity of the publishing value chain. If you look at what agents have done in the past, our primary roles of curation, being the first filter of good content between the creators and the publishers, of finding the right partners for bringing a work out to the public, for negotiating appropriate exploitation of rights and compensation for artists everywhere, these roles become more important when the publishing value chain that's neat and tiny and linear becomes a publishing value web that's messy, and no one's quite sure how the creator is going to meet with the consumer. So if we look at it from that standpoint, what we're trying to do with the Rogue Reader is recognize that although all the players in the middle of the value chain may have their roles threatened, and in fact they may themselves evaporate, all of the roles and functions there remain. The editorial, the design, the marketing, the curation, and the community building. And what ends up happening, I think, as we're watching it, is that so many of those responsibilities ends up sliding backward on the chain and landing on the back of the artist, and therefore that's where the agent needs to stand. So by agency managed, I mean fundamentally this, that in an age of radical disintermediation, this jettisoning of traditional players that stand between reader and writer, agents can respond with a kind of radical mediation in which they look for all possible partners and all possible paths for good stories to reach the readers that want to find them. We're a hybrid model, meaning that most of our authors have traditional publishing deals, or have had them, with Random House and Macmillan and others, but they come to us for the independent version of their publishing lifespan. And we're a hybrid model ourselves, meaning that we bring to bear, due to our in-house expertise, the traditional editing and design and marketing that you would find with the traditional player, but that we also bring to bear an independent mindset, creating brand power around individual authors, looking for flexibility of rights management and control, and then also bringing in the ability to be lightweight and nimble and partner with different technology companies that allow us to bring the best product to market. So instead of being tied into very top-heavy workflows, and instead of being tied into legacy infrastructure, we're able to partner with unique individuals like those guys who founded Pressbooks that allow us to build our work with XML workflows, which is more than many of our publishing friends can say. We aim to be audaciously curated, which means to us that in this age of complete abundance, the idea of curation only becomes more valuable. The idea that there is a place that matches your interests and helps you determine what's best for you to read right now only becomes of greater value when you have more choice and are frozen into inaction by the tyranny of great choice. So for us, that looks like this. It's very simple. One author a month introduced to our community, and one really great piece of immersive fiction introduced every week. That's it. It sounds incredibly bare bones. It sounds incredibly lean. And that, in fact, is its point, is we aim to counter the difficulty of abundance with the idea of curation, with the idea of aggressive and audacious curation. Those pieces of content are delivered by various means. You can text us your phone number and have our pieces of content delivered to you weekly and monthly by text message to your phone, which would open up on whatever reading device you're choosing to use. We send them out by email. In a month, when we launch our subscription app, because our threshold of subscribers has reached a certain level, you can access them through the app. A few of our titles, again, our endeavors here are modest. So this is Ro Couzon, a French writer born in Brittany who now lives in New Orleans, writing great crime fiction, very neo-noir, sort of in the tradition of Raymond Chandler. Michael Hogan, a Rust Belt writer, writing about the sort of decline of the moral center of America in the late 20th century. Ed Weinman, writing about Icelandic crime thrillers, Scando Crime Trend. Mark Conrad, writing from the streets of Philadelphia. Each of those authors has, at various levels, been chosen by their community as worthwhile. They've been chosen by Library Journal as Best Books of 2012. They've been chosen by Spine Tingler Magazine as Best Mysteries of the Year. They've been chosen by Barnes & Noble and Nook as Picks of the Month. Audaciously curated, agency managed, and author first, because in an age of integration, we believe that aggregation is power. We're looking out over a market that used to be hierarchical and verticalized, where any author that wanted to introduce their work to you in any container had to go through a traditional publishing house. And now we're seeing all of those authors break out of that hierarchy and verticalization into fragments scattered out across the market to the tune of 50,000 ebooks a month being published directly with Amazon KDP. This is disintermediation in a nutshell. The idea of an author believing that he or she can find her reader or his reader without the help of many of us in this room. And what we're suggesting with our model is that there are ways for traditional middlemen and traditional middlemen players to redefine themselves and reposition themselves nimbly enough to play the roles that they ought to play in helping that transaction happen. Because in a sense, when you look at it, we don't need a random house to market and distribute our book. We can go directly to Amazon. For our authors that are artists and visual creators, we don't need a Hallmark store to sell our greeting cards. We'll put it on Etsy, where many of our authors are making thousands of dollars a month selling their art. We don't even need the New York Times to review our books anymore. Last week, we had a book go viral on Reddit and sold 750 copies in an afternoon. That might not sound great, but compare it to the New York Times book review that it got in early November, where it sold a couple dozen copies. The traditional players that mediated the relationship between reader and writer are being redefined, and what we have an opportunity to do is reposition ourselves to take advantage of that. So for us, aggregation looks like this, that instead of all of our authors being let loose from the traditional publishing contracts and going on their own as fragments, we collect them together into a brand, into a sense of community that gathers around the same sense of style and voice. The idea of the author collective, where every one of our authors is endorsed and chosen by every one of our other authors. So there's a network effect that's created by each of our authors having participation, both emotionally, community-wise, but also revenue-wise in the success of others. And then this last point, the idea of aggregating in this way allows us to create communities that help us overcome our addiction to the idea of launch and overcome our addiction to the idea of title-by-title marketing, which is only going to get harder and harder to do. And the final piece is that we're digital first. In an integrated market, as Bob Stein was pointing out earlier, where video and music and text, where these boundaries are no longer entirely important anymore, we want to create experiences for readers that bring in all of these. So for us, this looks like making our full text of the book work as metadata for us by building XML first and webbooks first. This will sound a lot like Velobox. By creating multimedia constellations for each author where the book serves as the lodestar of that constellation, but recognizing that people engage with story in multiple ways. So we want to create video, we want to create audio, maps, images, charts, alcohol, cocktails, however people might be interested in the style and the posture and the personality that we're creating. And then, of course, using the technology we do, DRM-free, XML first, we can chunk our content, we can fragment it, we can bundle it in a variety of different ways. We can create omnibus editions or serial fiction editions. We are no longer bound up into the idea of the book being placed, this book, this valuable thing that we mined and we worked hard to find, being placed into a pretty box, and are telling consumers that all they can do is look through a pinhole to see if they might want it. We're just opening up the box and letting all the content out and trusting that if it's good enough, people might actually want to buy the container that it was found in. And here's the money slide that Marco was so insistent that we have. Here's State of the Union. I told you it was modest, but let me tell you this. Our marketing budget for the last 5 months was $0. we went in with a utopian vision, asking ourselves this: what if all we did was put out good content? That's all. And rely upon the fact that good content will draw a community. So we used the social web, and we used our webpage, and we used our email campaigns, but $0 spent on marketing. We didn't buy any ads, no banner ads. We didn't pay for anything. All we did was put good content out, and this is what we're getting. It's a modest experiment, but I believe if you look at it, you might find that that's something that you could easily implement.
That was good. So, any questions for Jason? So I get to grow them? Okay. So I have a question, and this is coming from some author friends. Let's talk about money.
Okay.
One of the biggest complaints authors have, well, there are two in one complaint, is the royalty statements take forever to receive. They get them twice yearly, and they're very slow coming. And they don't have a lot of information. Authors are generally confused. How are you answering those questions, or have you thought much about that?
Yes, we think about it a lot.
Okay, thank you. I thought as an agent you might.
Yes. So our software platform ingests the data that we get from BNN and Amazon and Kobo and Google and Sony, and spits it out in spreadsheets that authors have access to on Google Docs every day.
Okay, so they can see daily numbers.
It's very simple. So they're getting it not quite in real time. They're getting it with a few hours delay, maybe a day's delay, but in enough real time for them to understand if their efforts are worthwhile. This is huge in the States for people who are self-publishing. People who self-publish with Amazon get access to all their data immediately, so they know if a campaign is working or if an endeavor that they're putting in is paying off. And yet authors that are traditional published have no idea for many months whether or not anything they're doing matters.
And that does matter a lot to the authors. And another question that I have for you is, I hear from publishers all the time that authors are demanding DRM. You're publishing DRM free. How are you talking to your authors about this?
Well, because our community is somewhat self-selecting, I don't know that any author would want to do this with us who didn't already agree with some of our basic values. But I also think that anyone who's generally interested in publishing in this manner, by which I mean independent, direct-to-consumer, you're seeing our direct-to-consumer numbers here. The idea of reaching an audience without really any intermediary, or at least as few intermediaries as possible, understands that DRM is a big point of friction. Yeah. And so they usually are happy for it to evaporate.
Great. One last question, and it's kind of leading into our next speaker. How are you finding the people to fulfill these editorial, marketing, quality control kind of roles?
So the benefit of being an agent, besides one of the points of infrastructure here, is that once a title does come up, you already have the infrastructure you can leverage to do rights sales. But one of the benefits of being an agent is you have a cadre of writers, talented wordsmiths. And so in a sense, although the Rogue Reader is outside movable type management as a company, in much the same way as The Guardian, Nick was talking about it being such a small pocket of what they do, we still have access to the talent pool that resides in our agency.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope everyone's still surviving the long day of all this great information that we've gotten. So my name is Miral Satar. I'm the founder and CEO of BiblioCrunch. And what we do is we are right now the world's biggest publishing marketplace. So what our platform does is we take publishing professionals from around the world. We connect them with authors and publishers from around the world, and that helps them create exceptional books. So just a little bit of my background. I'm an engineer by background. Actually, I came up with this idea while I was in grad school studying digital publishing, so I had a chance to vet it with professors and industry people. And then I tried to launch a few pilot projects at Time Magazine, where I launched a bunch of digital initiatives. And I recognized that there was a huge need in the ebook space for finding quality professionals. So I left in 2011 to launch BiblioCrunch, and then which became a community platform where you can create books on the fly and access the marketplace of book publishing professionals. Now this number is from 2011, and its digital publishing is expected to grow to 2.7 billion by 2013, which is nearly 9 times larger than 2009, and we've already exceeded that. Ebook unit sales have skyrocketed, and ebook sales are rapidly growing. So what's the problem with all this digital, the introduction of digital technology? It's basically disrupted the industry because book publishing is one of the last industries to go digital, so it's going through the fastest change. Publishers are downsizing and need to rely on freelancers to support their business. It's challenging and expensive for authors and publishers to find qualified book professionals to help publish books, especially high publisher level quality books. And most authors would actually rather just focus on writing than spend time on the traditional responsibilities of publishers like editing, production, conversion, proofing, cover design, layout, sales and marketing, distribution, and app development. So what we do is we give individuals and companies access to trusted professionals to help publish books seamlessly. And we have 500 professionals who range from the whole spectrum. We make them all fill out rigorous applications. And pretty soon, the way that we're seeing the publishing industry, we've already seen this happen in the magazine industry a little bit, is freelancing is the future. So who uses our services? So we first started out just targeting traditional big publishers, but then we realized that that wasn't a really good way to make money and it was hard to get them to spend money. And we actually found a lot of authors using our services. And we started targeting self-published authors, and then we started having traditional authors come to us. And then along with the publishers came large publishers, magazine publishers, and like Jason Ashlock, who just spoke a few minutes ago, literary agents use the platform too to find vetted resources, and then independent presses use them too. So what's the market like? So you have the entire publishing services spectrum. You have do-it-yourself authors who will write their book, they'll design their cover, their market, they'll do everything. And then you have the traditional publishers who do everything, but in between you have a huge spectrum of people who provide these editorial services. And with digital, you actually don't need to go through the traditional gatekeepers anymore. So you have people who provide professional editing, cover and design, app development, blog tours, conversion, marketing, etc. And basically, BiblioCrunch takes the offline community interactions between authors and publishers and book publishing firms and brings them online to make book publishing seamless. So let's say you're an author or publisher, you have a book publishing need. We get a lot of PDF to EPUB conversions, cover design, editing, distribution. You launch your project on BiblioCrunch. You say what your budget is, who you're looking to hire exactly, and when you need the work done by. And then you'll get responses and proposals from professionals who are interested in doing the project. You get to take a look at their portfolio, their references, and then you can manage the whole system online. So some of our most popular categories are editing. We get a lot of requests for copy editors, developmental editors, proofreaders, because with downsizing, especially in big publishing, these are the people that get laid off first, and so publishers actually look to outsource these services. We get a lot of authors and publishers looking for conversion services. PDF to EPUB is still surprisingly high in demand. I didn't know so many authors and publishers had all their backlists and all these books in PDF. And then a lot of authors use their site for marketing and PR services. Blog tours are less expensive to organize than author tours. Book launches and promotions are easy to do online, so they just hire someone to do that. It's easy for them to find people who are connected to TV stations, news outlets, and radio shows through our platform. This is just a screenshot of our platform and all the services that we provide. You can register as an author and a publisher, or you could register as a freelancer and you have to fill out an application process. So we've taken a lot of feedback from authors and publishers, and we've made it as easy as possible. And we've given them step-by-step directions on how to actually launch something or launch a project. This is just a screenshot of our profile page. So you could get a sense of who you're working with, what others have said about them, and how they've been reviewed. And then you can check out all their social media, and you can share the profiles on social media. Now, this is the money slide. So we first started out as basic platform as free, and then we realized that a lot of authors and a lot of smaller publishers who weren't familiar with the digital space needed hand-holding. So that's where we launched our premium plans, the concierge service. And so basically, we have a subscription fee for premium services. We have a tiered plan. The premium services include access to the professionals directory, member messaging, and event discounts. We have an event every month that focuses on a different aspect of publishing. We have author concierge services where we kind of just handhold the author through the entire process. And then also, if you're a publishing professional, we charge a project transaction fee, but we've actually been able to convert a lot of them to the paid model by waiving that transaction fee if they actually become subscribers. So just to date, we relaunched in 2012, last summer. We have a huge network of people to reach out to. We have 14,000 Facebook fans. We have about 2,500 Twitter followers. We have 2,500 registered authors and 500 registered publishing professionals. And 1/3 of them are actually paid subscribers since last September. And that's pretty much BiblioCrunch. Questions?
First person on my panel to finish early. Good job. Any questions from the audience first? Come on, we've only got 2 more speakers after her. We've got to get one more question in. No? Okay. So one question I think might be really of interest to this particular group is how do you, is part of the marketplace international professionals, people who are outside the U.S.?
Yes.
Okay.
So we put them through a rigorous application process. First, they have to speak English. So if they could provide services and they've already worked for a big publisher and they've already have recommendations from other books, then we'll let them into our platform.
Okay. And a little bit more on the application process. How are you vetting these professionals? I mean, obviously there's the crowdsourced aspect of it where people have actually worked with them and say, I can trust this person. But what kind of questions are on the application that give everybody a sense of how you're vetting?
Well, the easiest way, for editors, if you're already part of an editorial association that has already pre-vetted you, like the Editorial Freelance Association or the Canada Editors Association, like they've already asked their people, or the American Society of Journalists and Authors, they've already asked their people to go through a rigorous process. So that's one checkpoint. Then we check to see if you have LinkedIn. We check to see if you have a website. And then we check out your books. And then lastly, we Google you to make sure. And the best way I do is beware in the name of the person, or like scam the name of the person.
So I'm not going to pass this process is what you're saying. Another thing I wanted to ask you, because I've noticed you have regular chats on Twitter, and how are you using social media to build the BiblioCrunch brand and just generally the community?
Okay. So that's a good question. So one thing we realized with authors is they can tell very easily when you're trying to sell a product to them versus trying to help them. So what we do is we have events every month that focus on a different aspect of indie publishing or marketing or whatever, and then we've kind of built a community of 300 people in New York around that, and then that's one community. We host a chat every week called Indie Chat, and Indie Chat is basically, we'll bring in a special guest. Last week we had Kobo, and they'll answer questions for the authors, and then we also have a blog which we just publish tips on.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, great to be here. So yeah, I'm CTO of Publit, print-on-demand and ebook service based in Stockholm, now going international. But I won't talk too much about Publit today. I'll talk about the war going on between publishers and libraries in the world today around the issue of ebooks in the library context. And I'll talk about how we are working to address those issues. And I'll also specifically talk about 2 pilot projects that are going on right now in Stockholm. One where a library is becoming essentially a publisher, and the other one where libraries and publishers are entering into active partnership. So nobody seems to be happy with how ebooks work in libraries. And this is also reflected by the facts on the ground, where almost all of the world's largest trade publishers are now either withdrawing their ebooks catalogs from library circulation altogether, raising prices drastically, or making changes to licensing terms that are so unpopular that some public libraries actually blacklist publishing houses. This is a screen grab from a couple of days ago. Now, what would seem to be the root cause of all these conflicts? It is my belief that we're stuck in an inappropriate licensing paradigm where we're basically trying to make ebooks behave like print books in the library context. So you buy one ebook, you get to lend it to patrons with no further cost, just like you would a print book. An ebook can only be lent to one patron at a time. If you want to make it available to more than one patron, you have to buy more than one copy. And it actually wears out. An ebook nowadays, it wears out after a certain number of library circulations. For some publishers in America, it's 26. In Denmark now, it's down to 4 circulations before the ebook is worn out. You have to buy it again. And that's really no way to treat an ebook. Because ebooks are not commodities that can be traded. The right of first sales doctrine does not apply to ebooks. Instead, ebooks are services, and that they must be licensed on terms that need to be negotiated between the licensor and the licensee. So now I told you some about how ebooks work in library context in most parts of the world. It's one little corner of the world where it doesn't work that way. The Swedish model for ebook lending is different. It basically treats ebooks as services. A library gets access to a full catalog without entry fee. There's no cap on the number of patrons that get to lend an ebook concurrently. And there's a cost, most significantly, for every transaction. So you have to pay as a library a fee every time an ebook is made available to a patron. So how's that working out for us? It seems like it's working out pretty well. Trade statistics from September last year says that 6 times as many ebooks were distributed through the Swedish library system than through all commercial outlets combined last year. That's a pretty staggering piece of data there, I think. Publit has been working for a couple of years now to prepare its entry into this market, and we are doing so by fixing the bugs in the Swedish model. Because there's been a long tradition of a de facto monopoly where one distributor is charging a 50% distribution fee, and also, for reasons lost to history, all prices on ebooks circulated to libraries are hard-coded. They all cost the same 20 krona, roughly equivalent of €2. And this has created a situation where publishers naturally need to protect sales, and the way they do that is they window library circulation of ebooks. And that's created a lot of bad blood in library community. Because librarians, of course, feel a need to be able to work with all types of titles, front list as well as backlist and midlist. But this has become increasingly hard for them for the last year. So the way we're fixing the Swedish model is, first of all, we lower the distribution fee. And second of all, we introduce dynamic pricing, which means the publisher gets to decide what the book will cost in the library to circulate. And it unlocks a whole area of entrenchment and conflicts where now you could actually start to discuss what would be the reasonable price points for circulating front list to libraries instead of windowing. And third things that we're doing is provide tools for the library to filter what titles to carry, depending on a number of different parameters. Sort of like a spin-off from this unintended side effect has been that our platform, the platform that we're building, is being used more and more now by libraries themselves acting as a publisher. And this is one of the pilot projects I'm going to tell you about. Concerns this couple, Alva and Gunnar Myrdal, Swedish social scientists from the 20th century, famously awarded one Nobel Prize each in the 70s and the 80s, respectively. Still, the books they wrote, and these are very influential books. I mean, they helped form Swedish society, basically. And you couldn't, until a year ago, you couldn't get a hold of them. And if you did, it would be a really expensive copy on a second-hand bookstore with scribblings in the margins. So what the city of Stockholm did, a group of entrepreneurial librarians there, was to digitize these books with the help of public services, turn them into POD and ebook editions, and circulate them back to their own patrons without DRM. In addition to this, they put them up onto Apple iBook Store as well, just because they could, basically. These are Creative Commons licensed works. And turns out they're doing pretty well at it. The average commercial ebook circulated during this time twice per month to patrons in Stockholm. Now, the average Myrdal title, we're talking about 11 titles, circulated 8 times per month during the same time frame. I think this is a really important piece of data, and it begs the question, how should we interpret that? I think we should interpret it in this way. I think librarians are inherently book lovers. They're really good at moving backlist. That's a core competence of libraries. They're good at creating enthusiasm around titles and works that have been forgotten for a long time. Which also is the reason why I'm thinking that libraries should could become important allies to publishers, because those are organizations that are good at moving front list, but they're increasingly dependent on moving backlist, on an available and living backlist in order to reap the fruits of the long tail economy. Now, the second pilot that I'm going to talk about is where a library enters into active partnership with a publisher. And this has been no small feat. I started out the first decade of my career as a grassroots negotiator in the Middle East and Northern Ireland and the Balkans, and I'm feeling right back at where I started. But after many years of negotiation, this is now happening. Mid-sized publisher in the city of Stockholm is gearing up in this project where frontlist titles are made available from day one without windowing, and the library lowers its cost for mid and backlist titles. And the third part of it is called dual licensing. It is where the library helps digitize the publisher's out-of-print titles, 25 cherry-picked titles, and in return they get to circulate those for free for the next 11 years, which is the time frame it would take them to redeem the cost that they invested in this catalog. I see you standing there, Kasi. I just want to show this last picture. It was taken 4 days ago. It shows the city of Stockholm in the background. And in front of it is the still ice-covered pond. And this place is really a nice place in Stockholm. And spring has come to the city when this place is occupied by skaters. So I find these two guys here now hacking away at the ice out of sheer impatience with the skateboards laying at the side. And I think it's a really nice image of enthusiasm, really. And it really sums up where we're at in this issue also, because we're also hacking away at the issue of ebook lending. I think what we've done so far is no silver bullet. It won't end the war over ebooks, but I think it's a really promising start, and already new initiatives are cropping up all over Sweden. Thank you.
They need to switch up machines. So, any tough questions for our gentleman? Come on, somebody's got a tough library question. Yeah. Was that a hand?
How long does it take to
Okay, how long does it take to clear the ice? Yeah. Days, weeks?
Is it worth the effort? Would be another question.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your shuttling process, your bicycle process.
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah.
diplomacy involved in your job.
Yeah. Yeah, I just told you that I used to actually work as a negotiator for many years, and this has been very much the case now for the last couple of years. I've been riding my bicycle back and forth through Stockholm, telling publishers, what if the library would say this, and going back and saying, what if they would say that? And it's proved, it felt fruitless for a long time, but it proved to unlock some really key areas. And in the end, it seems like, why didn't we do this before? It's a clearly win-win situation, but it's taken a long time to get there.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then another thing that you touched on briefly, and I cut you off probably before you got deep into it, is backlist.
Yeah.
You gave us one really good example, but why is it so important for publishers to invest in their backlist?
It's a massive problem for anyone outside of the English-speaking language area, I think, especially in a small language area like the Swedish one. We got like 6,000 ebooks in commercial circulation titles now. It's nothing. And the oldest ones are from 2009, roughly speaking. And there's a real big need to dive into the backlist and to digitize it. And the costs are increasing as you get back to where there are no PDFs. You need to scan the files, you need to OCR them, proofread them. So that's why it's not happening. And that's why you need some sort of a hybrid model like the dual licensing to make it happen, right. I believe.
And then we have a question back here from Ed, who's lost his microphone. Come on,
It's okay.
3 questions, Ed. Come on, this
Hello.
is excellent.
Okay, I was curious. One of the things I've heard said about the Swedish ebook lending is that it's had, as the numbers you demonstrated, had a very deleterious effect on bookstores. It's getting blamed a lot for this plummeting in pricing. I'm curious if you could talk about, on sales, and if you could talk about that, and also what's the reality of your system scaling up to a much bigger market like that in Italy? Because with Sweden, you're talking about 8,000 people, 6,000 ebooks. But when you try to scale your own platform, do you think it's scalable, or is it only applicable in a relatively small market comparatively?
Well, I'll pick this second question first. There's a few librarians in the room, and we had this discussion yesterday, and it's clearly an issue also on the Italian market that you need to digitize backlist, but there's no commercial means for doing it. The complete works of Freud was one example that really needs digitizing in Italian, the Italian translation. So I think the models would scale beautifully if people would just put down their guns. I mean, as for the first question, the Swedish market is, we could have a couple of beers over this, but it's just a mess from the beginning. And the fact that libraries taken over has many different reasons, but one important one is the vertical integration, where the big publishing houses own their own retail outlet, and they make tons of money selling paper books. So they also delayed the ebook tipping point, while during this time, it just happened in the library sector. So it's good and bad, and there's many different more reasons for it.
One more question. Mm-hmm. Okay, we have set a record.
Can I have a microphone, please?
Okay, so we've got 2. One? Okay, one question. Sorry, Marco. Oh, 2.
Yeah, now it works. You mentioned that after 25 or something readings of an ebook lent from a library, it doesn't work anymore. Can you explain what happens?
This is why HarperCollins, a lot of public libraries in the States are still boycotting HarperCollins. It's called the HarperCollins rule, amendment to... and as I said, they're the first ones to do it, and the limit was put at 26. Now that limit is coming down. What happens is fundamentally the library loses its ebooks, because we emulate we try to make it so that the library thinks they own an ebook, and then when it wears out, they need to buy it again. But it's all really what it really is. It's you buy a license, and license lets you lend it 26 times or whatever.
Okay, and one more.
Well, mine is not a question, it's rather a comment. I'm the director of the public library system in Milan, and since the speaker was talking about librarians, I think it was only too suitable for me to give a comment about that. And the questions asked by the colleague before suggest that, the Italian market should be regarded on two levels. The first one is about digitalizing blacklist of books. Most of the books of Italian literature are not currently read in Italy, but they happen to be very popular abroad. Because believe it or not, you see the demand of Italian classical literature abroad is tending to grow more and more. So this is the first level. This is a wealth, sort of cultural wealth, which doesn't have to be lost because it's very much on demand on an international scale. I had recently a meeting in China. You must realize in Shanghai, in the public system, they have 246 public libraries interconnected. I'm talking about a place like Shanghai with 26 million inhabitants. So this is the proportion. You can imagine how big it is. And there is a great demand of Italian classical literature online because hundreds of thousands of Chinese tend to learn Italian, but not the contemporary literature, but the classical literature as well. And as far as the contemporary literature is concerned, you see, the phenomenon is visibly growing. A few years ago in Milan, you see, it was quite unusual. It would have been unlikely to see people reading online text in the metro, but now it's part of our daily experience. So gradually, little by little, as soon as the young generations approaches and comes to the stages of life, this need is growing, is visibly growing. I haven't got the number now because it's a comparatively new phenomenon, but it's gaining ground. It's visibly gaining ground. So this is just a comment, of course.
Thank you very much.
Hello, hello. Thank you. Thank you for being patient and being here all day. Thank you to Marco and Camilla as well for inviting me today. I'm gonna try to be brief as possible. I'm a writer. I write fiction. I write novels. I've written a lot of novels. I write short stories as well. My most recent novel was called The Mistress of Nothing. It came out in 2009, literary fiction, historical fiction. It did well because in Canada, which is where I come from initially, it won a big prize. So as we know in the world of literature these days, prizes help, prizes sell books. So that's my most recent novel. I also write digital fiction, multimedia, born digital, new collaborative forms, really. For the last decade, I've been working in this field as well as writing novels, really thinking about new forms of literature, moving beyond the book. Of course, I write novels, so I'm a lover of books, but I'm also interested to see what happens when you begin to move beyond the book and what that can offer to us as readers and writers. So a little definition here of what digital fiction is, at least in my realm: works that combine text with images, video, sound effects, music, animation, and sometimes games. Cassia mentioned a large project of mine, which is called Inanimate Alice, which you can see online for free at inanimatealice.com. And it's a story about a girl who wants to be a games designer when she grows up. So there's a narrative reason for games to be embedded in that particular story. One of the frustrations for me over the last decade has been that these two forms of literature, these two forms of writing, really do exist in parallel. My work as a literary novelist and my work as a collaborative multimedia fiction maker don't coincide very often. And it's been one of my goals over the last decade to try to bring these two worlds a bit closer together. One of the key differences for me between a book and a work of digital fiction is that there's an essential way in which a work of digital fiction is spreadable. This is Henry Jenkins' media concept, spreadable media. He puts it in opposition to viral media, and he says he doesn't like the connotations of the word virus with infection, etc. Whereas if we think about digital artifacts as being spreadable, things that people want to share, things that people want to comment on and feedback on, that's a very different way of thinking about how media can spread online, how content can spread online, and what it means to be able to respond to your readers in an effective and engaged way. One of my frustrations with ebooks as they exist currently is that, as we know, they use the technology of the web with none of the advantages of the web. And we've had lots of mentions today of things like web books, things that move beyond the container of the book presently. And it's been really interesting to me to watch the fate of two particular projects of mine, the novel Mistress of Nothing and Inanimate Alice. Inanimate Alice has 4 episodes, the final published in the same year as The Mistress of Nothing. But with the digital work, the audience has grown and changed. It's become a children's audience, it's become a pedagogical audience. Whereas the audience for the book, as we all know, don't American publishers say now that the average life of a book once it's published is 13 weeks? It's quite difficult to figure out what to do with a title that was published in 2009, whereas a book that resides online perhaps will have a different kind of more spreadable afterlife in the publishing universe. I'm going to show you a tiny bit of a work of mine called Flight Paths, because we are tired and we like stories. So this is a work of mine from a few years ago, a networked novel, multimedia piece, a participatory piece of fiction. Actually, we engaged with Bob Stein's Institute of the Future of the Book with this project, and used, in its first iteration, it existed in a blog where we used Comment Press, which is a very useful widget in WordPress. So I should have some sound. This is a story about an airplane stowaway young man called Jakob, who you see on the black side of the screen, and a woman called Harriet, who lives in London. He's stowed away in a plane that is flying into Heathrow. And this is the moment that he falls out of the landing gear of the plane and is introduced to Harriet, the other character in this particular story. So in this, this is a story I've been obsessed with for a long time, since first reading about airplane stowaways falling out of planes and landing near Heathrow more than 10 years ago. And my interest in this project has extended through flight paths itself into my new project, which is a work that combines two digital fiction elements with a long-form prose novel. So as you can see here, these are the three works that that I'm currently working on now. Flight Paths already exists. It's a digital fiction, 6 episodes online for free. It was initially funded by a grant from Arts Council England. It's in Flash, so already, even though it's just a few years old, it's already slightly obsolete. Independently published in 2009. The novel, are we at 8 minutes already? Okay. The novel, which will come out in 2014, published with traditional publishers. I just last week sold it to the first publisher partner, Doubleday Random House in Canada. They claim that they're very interested in the digital fiction elements of this project. So this is the next conversation that will take place with my Canadian publisher in particular, is to see how to move forward with a project that exists on several platforms, as this does. And Jewel, as you can see here, which is the new, which will be released at the same time as the novel, free initial episode to get people interested, episodes 2 to 4, probably through some kind of bundle, either individually or subscription model. Again, published either with the traditional publisher if they're interested in investing and being involved in this aspect of the project, or indeed it could be published independently, as all my multimedia works have been up to date, because really to date there hasn't been any publishers for this kind of work. I think that this kind of multimedia work is now emerging because the devices are here with us that are perfect for this kind of work. Business models are emerging, new forms of literature are emerging, but at the moment they're still not emerging from traditional publishing. They're coming from other directions. They're coming from games, they're coming from film, they're coming from all different kinds of people. There you go. That's my new project. So, Cassia.
Any questions for Kate? Or applause for Kate?
End of the day, always tough.
Any questions? Well, I've got questions for Kate. And I don't know if anybody's talked about this yet. I touched on it briefly in my presentation, but one aspect of our new reading world is user-generated content. Can you talk about your experiences with this trend and your work?
Yeah, because I write literary fiction, I don't come from a tradition that has, like science fiction, which has fan fiction, a long tradition of readers talking back to writers. But for me, the most interesting moment in my sort of evolution of trying to think about this work came in 2009 with my project Inanimate Alice, which has 4 episodes online. And through the Google alerts for Inanimate Alice in 2009, I came across a whole bunch of new episode 5s, which I thought, what are they? We didn't create any episode 5s. Where have these come from? And so tracking the links, I discovered that they'd come from a classroom in the US. A teacher had been using these set of stories in the classroom with 17-year-olds, and they then created their own versions of the story. And for me, that was a really meaningful moment in what it means for a work to converse with its audience, for readers to be able to talk back to content, for content to take on new meaning through interaction with its audience. That really changed my mindset, and has been something I've been trying to incorporate in all my fiction projects since then.
Okay. And one more question, and I asked Helman about this, and I want to ask you about it. Creating digital media requires teamwork. Can you talk about how you find collaborators for your work? And I notice you credit them, and you're the face, but there's many people helping Kate.
Yeah, no, I always collaborate when it comes to the digital fiction work. I mean, all publishing is a form of collaboration, but with digital fiction, it's a very direct form of collaboration. But usually just small teams, usually just me and one other person. I've been very lucky in meeting people that I've really enjoyed working with, and as the way it is in the world, one thing leads to another, really. But I gave a talk recently at Tools of Change in New York City to an audience of largely writers, and this kind of question kept coming up. So my sort of advice was that what we all need to do is hug a technologist. Go out there and find a technologist to make friends with if you're interested in this kind of work. So all
technologists in the audience who need hugs, hands? Great. Well, thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Cassie.